A little later.
Perfect time to buy a new DeVille, because right now is spring savings time at your local Cadillac dealers. Get your hands on this great deal, up to $5,400 off when you purchase a new Spring Edition DeVille. $5,400. The beautiful Spring Edition DeVille includes chrome wheels, leather seating, and gold ornamentation. But hurry, Cadillac spring savings time ends soon. Visit your Cadillac dealers, your luxury leaders, today.
Later on The Tonight Show, find out what makes Judge Ito's hands so touchably soft.
With a special dream team of moisturizers, nutrients, and emollients.
Plus 3 cheers for Kirstie Alley. Saturday Night Live's Al Franken, country superstar Clint Black, and Jay gets a makeover. NBC Tonight.
5 News at 10 continues.
On Monday, Air Vantage will cease passenger commuter service in North and South Dakota and in Minnesota.
Air Vantage, which makes small trips to several South Dakota cities, including Sioux Falls, says it has significant additional freight and courier volume now and can no longer stay in the passenger business. Air Vantage says anyone holding tickets, whether refundable or non-refundable, can get reimbursement or perhaps transfer to another airline.
It seems like only yesterday, but tomorrow, the ecology movement in America will officially be 25 years old. Tomorrow is the silver anniversary of Earth Day, which led to our many environmental laws and regulations that, though not always popular, undoubtedly are responsible for making our world a cleaner place. Cammie Melton tonight reports on how far we came in 25 years and how far we have yet to go.
Joyce and John Rise are thankful that they don't have to go far to enjoy nature. This park across from where they live always has plenty to see.
We have a lot of birds. You got your all types of wildlife. You even got deer here.
That's what we need. When you see all those little kids up there in the swings and stuff, it's beautiful. And the mamas or the babysitters or whatever bringing them there, they need outside too.
The Rices, like many people, hope we all stop and think tomorrow about preserving these natural habitats. Tomorrow is Earth Day 1995, the 25th anniversary. It all began here with America's first Earth Day on April 22nd, 1970, when 20 million people demonstrated against polluting the environment. Before this day, protecting nature was not something people talked about. But 25 Earth Days later, things have changed. There's been an increased awareness of how to live in harmony with nature. That's making a difference right here in South Dakota.
It has been decades since bald eagles have successfully reared young in the state. In the last 2 years, we've raised, I think, bald eagles have successfully reared 2 clutches in the state. So things like the Endangered Species Act have worked.
But there are many challenges that are still ahead, the greatest of which is to find a balance between our needs and the needs of nature.
We need to find a way of living in our environment, whether it's the Black Hills or the Eastern Prairies, or the state of South Dakota, or the Midwest, or the world, in a way that leaves something for those folks coming after us.
And in order to do that, Earth Day must not only be celebrated tomorrow, but become a lifestyle, realizing that the way we live our everyday life affects the environment we live in. In Sioux Falls, Cammie Melton, KDLT News.
Today was the day parents registered their kids for kindergarten in the Sioux Falls schools, and to make the trip from carefree kid to student life a little easier, there was a mini train at Annie Sullivan Elementary today. After registering for school, the students-to-be took a tour of the school by train.
They bring them down to their room, and they enjoy that, and they'll remember it, and they like the school here very much. So I think it's really helpful for the kids for coming next. They'll be looking forward to coming here.
All just ahead on CNN Weekend. The hunt for those responsible for the Oklahoma bombing focuses on a man known only as John Doe No. 2. Still at large is this white male with a medium build, 5 foot 9 inches to 5'10", weighing 175 to 180 pounds, with brown hair and a tattoo on his left arm. The FBI says the suspect is considered armed and dangerous. The only suspect charged in the bombing is Timothy McVeigh, a former soldier said to be to have been enraged at the U.S. government because of the 1993 raid at the Branch Davidian compound in Waco, Texas. And despite wind and light rain, the search has resumed for bodies and possible survivors at the bombed-out federal building in Oklahoma City. And we go now to Gary Tuckman, who's standing by with the latest on that. Gary, is it still raining out there?
Well, Catherine, it's raining very hard, as a matter of fact, and that's made this very difficult search effort even more difficult. As a matter of fact, because of the hard rain and winds and wind chill factor, about 20 degrees right now, they've had to call off the search for many hours today. They just resumed the search about a half an hour ago, but it's very likely that even as we speak, they may have to call it off because within the last 5 or 10 minutes, the weather's gotten much worse. The big problem they have here is they haven't found any survivors for a couple of days, and that's not a good sign. They did find a survivor Wednesday night, a 15-year-old girl, but Thursday went by, Friday went by, and now today has gone by. They have not found anyone alive in the rubble. The death toll right now, the official death toll is 70 people. However, that will climb much higher as the days wear on because there are many bodies still inside the center. The 70 number that we're talking about is only the number of people who've been brought to the morgue. So the death toll will go up. They're hoping they find survivors, but so far they haven't found a survivor for the last 3 days. This is Gary Tuckman, CNN Live in Oklahoma City.
All right, thank you, Gary. Well, as events unfold in Oklahoma City, many are focusing on the impact of the tragedy on children, including the President and First Lady, who invited some young people and their parents to the White House Saturday. Mrs. Clinton asked how best to remember.
At my brother's daycare, when my school was closed, we planted trees to remember the kids that got hurt.
That is a wonderful idea. Did you all hear what she said? That they planted trees to remember the kids who got hurt? That's something that schools and daycare centers could do all over the country.
I think something should be done so that all of us remember those children in Oklahoma City, don't you?
The Clintons will be in Oklahoma City Sunday, a national day of mourning. I'm Catherine Calloway in Atlanta. And now Pat Etheridge with a special live edition of Parenting Today, focusing on the children of this tragedy.
Welcome to this special live edition of Parenting Today. I'm Pat Etheridge. The bone-chilling reality is that the terrorist attack in Oklahoma City was in part a horrifying assault on children. This next half hour will focus on the fallout for families, both for parents and children of those buried in the rubble and those around the world who watched this nightmare unfold. We'll be going live to the scene of the disaster for the latest from CNN correspondent Gary Tuckman. And joining us from our New York bureau, Dr. Lawrence Balter, a noted family psychologist and author on the subject of parenting. Together, we'll be fielding your phone calls. You can call us with your questions and concerns at area code 404-221-1855. But first, here is what the families of Oklahoma City are facing.
I started pulling babies. Babies were under this, under that. It was awful.
I heard a baby crying, and we started moving bricks and rocks back on top of it, and we found 2 babies. The officer I was with took one down one hallway, and I took my baby out the other way.
She's looking for her son. Do you know where they were evacuated to?
Thank you, baby. Thank you.
He's a toddler. He's about 20 months old. She's fine. She just had a cut from glass on her forehead, some minor cuts on her arms.
I was really mad that there was be some kind of person that could do that. I don't know if he knew there were children inside or not, but I mean, it's bad enough innocent lives, but innocent children.
My heart's broken that the kids died. I heard something that sounded like a large bolt of lightning hitting down. I feel sorry for the kids' parents because they died. I'm going to sleep. It kind of feels sad because the kids...
I have been very concerned with how the children in Oklahoma City and indeed the children throughout America must be reacting to a horror of this magnitude. And my message to the children is that this was an evil thing. And the people who did it were terribly, horribly wrong. We will catch them and we will punish them.
It is a time when children need a leader, so the leader of the nation reaches out. The President and First Lady will be in Oklahoma City tomorrow for a memorial service. On site in Oklahoma City is CNN correspondent Gary Tuckman, who joins us now live. Gary, we know about the bad weather in the area. Where do things stand with the search, particularly with regard to the child care center there?
Well, Pat, that's a good question. Just about 2 hours ago, officials here told us they are finally getting close to the child care center in their search. The reason they haven't gotten there yet is that the child care center was on the second floor of this building. They've completely gone through the 3rd through 9th floors of the building, but the 2nd and 1st floor sunk down way low, and there's tons of rubble on top of the child care center, so they're hoping to get close to it. Right now, we know 12 children are confirmed dead. 17 children are in the hospital right now, some of them in critical condition, but right now it has not publicly been told to us how many children may still be inside that building. As a matter of fact, no one may know that answer because the daycare center did not keep exact, accurate records as to how many children were in there when the bomb went off on Wednesday. Pat?
Well, it is that waiting and wondering that must be the most difficult thing of all. What can you tell us about how the families of Oklahoma City are holding up?
Well, that's the toughest thing, Pat, because we as parents, the greatest thing we can offer our children is the fact that they'll always be safe with us. And these parents who had children in the daycare center, who dropped them off for the day, and perhaps their biggest worry was they wouldn't get enough attention in the daycare center, are now dealing with the fact that many of them lost their children to a terrorist while they were in the daycare center. It's a tremendous guilt for these parents. And that's why a lot of psychological help has been offered to parents who lost their children during this blast. A story I could tell you, which is just an incredible story. The 17 children have all been brought to the same hospital. It's called the Children's Hospital of Oklahoma. The other day while the children were there, 5 bomb threats were called into the hospital. Bomb threats taken so seriously that the hospital had to be evacuated. The children who were very sick obviously couldn't leave, but the hospital officials asked the parents to please leave because there's a bomb threat. We have to take this seriously. The parents unanimously told them, we left our children on Wednesday in the daycare center. We're not going to leave them again.
CNN's Gary Tuckman in Oklahoma City. Thank you for bringing us up to date. And when we come back, we'll be joined by a family psychologist who will offer some guidance on coping with crisis. We'll also be taking your phone calls. If you'd like some advice, the number is area code 404-221-1855. To help in coming to terms with this crisis, we turn now to Dr. Lawrence Balter, an author and family psychologist who joins us from our CNN Bureau in New York. Dr. Balter, thank you for being with us today.
Hi.
Let's begin with the children directly affected, those who were hurt or may have lost parents. What do they need most right now?
Well, any child who's either witnessed this horrible tragedy or him or herself experienced loss of a loved one needs a great deal of attention. Normally, under circumstances when a child loses somebody, we'd say give them a lot of support and attention. Have people around them, keep them occupied, give them an opportunity to talk about their feelings, and invite them really to express themselves. This isn't even a normal circumstance, though. This is such a horrible tragedy of immense proportions that they'll need even extra care. I think one will have to address the special circumstances surrounding this, as well as their own personal reactions.
Well, has reality had time to set in yet, or is the shock and trauma of all of this still in store?
Well, I think it's going to build. At first, people in the midst of a trauma gather all their energies together and manage as best they can. Usually there's a short period of numbness when people don't really feel the deep emotions that really accompany such an experience as this. And after a little while, when some of the excitement, and there's a lot of excitement around, there are people doing things, lots of activity, a lot of hubbub. Once that ceases, And once some of the media coverage dies down, then I think it will begin to seep in. And people will begin to feel their losses. And I think then you're going to see some grief and bereavement going on.
Well, this, of course, has affected not only the people of Oklahoma City, but indeed the people around the world. We now have a caller on the phone from New York. Go ahead.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes. I would like to compare the country's sort of reaction to the children dying here. And there's been a lot of coverage from the president all the way down to the media covering it. And the children that died at Waco, who I understand there were about 24 children who were killed there, they ended up in pauper graves, I believe. No one even gave them whatever, a memorial service or anything. And I just like to know, I just like to ask what you feel about the country's reaction in this case and in the other case.
Well, it's a difficult question for me to answer. As a psychologist and a child psychologist, I can respond to some of the psychological issues that apply to people, individual people. For me to really tell you about a country's reaction would be stepping way outside of my expertise. I can say, of course, that in any situation, the loss of innocent lives is deplorable, and certainly children being killed is a horrible thing to witness.
We go to Maryland for our next call. Your question for Dr. Balter.
Yes, my question is that I've heard that there are some talks about reconstructing this building. Wouldn't it be very healing for this nation and for the city of Oklahoma? The building was torn down, and the plot was made as a memorial. Put a beautiful tree there. Put beautiful growing things there, so that the children of this country can see our love and our hope.
Well, that's certainly an interesting idea, to use that particular place as a memorial for future generations to remember and, in a sense, to memorialize those people who lost their lives in this senseless tragedy. Certainly an interesting idea, and one that I guess the officials of that particular community will have to think about. It's a good idea, by the way. While we're talking about memorializing, the president suggested that he'll be at memorial service. It's very important for children, as well as adults, to attend memorial services. Sometimes parents want to shield their children from losses. And at such times, it may occur to parents to maybe keep kids away from funerals and memorial services because they think it might be overwhelming or upsetting to their kids. It's really a very important thing for kids to attend services, so they know what's going on, so they see that people do care about those who died, and that together we can express our feelings of mourning. And I think that's very, very important. It signals something that we cared about the people who died.
There is a caller on the line from Illinois. Go ahead.
Hi. My business thing right now is that I think that anyone that hurts a child is no way in this world deserves any type of special treatment or anything. And I agree with the president that they should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. The children are our future, and to destroy them is to destroy this country. My main concern is that how do you comfort a child that wake up in the middle of the night screaming and not able to adjust to what's going on around them? And also, I know President Clinton is going to be down there tomorrow. I think he's doing an outstanding job handling this situation. Do you think that he should visit the site and see what's going on and try to touch base with the children in the hospital?
Yes, I'd like to respond to several parts of what you said. Most often we feel like we want to get even with the person who did something terrible. And in this case, I think by the president saying that we're going to have swift action taken against the people who are responsible for this horrible crime, it's very important because it's reassuring to know that people won't get away with things that are horrible. Sometimes we don't catch the bad people, but it's important that we make every effort to do so and that we show that we mean business when we do catch them. So that was really very reassuring. I think he did the right thing there. Yes, it's important, I think, for him to go there and meet with the community and the children and show that someone does care and show that as a leader, he's going to take every opportunity to do what he can to help the people rebuild. And by rebuilding, it's also not just the physical rebuilding, but also the emotional rebuilding. And knowing that someone who's in charge, an authority figure and a symbol like the president is exceedingly important. And it's an excellent idea that he go there.
We'll be back with more of Dr. Balter and your phone calls right after this.
In the $22,000 to $29,000 price class, many cars rank above average in initial quality. However, according to the J.D. Power & Associates initial quality study, one car ranks best: Buick Park Avenue. Park Avenue. We hope this throws some light on the subject of your next car.
Here's a question for you. Do you know who sells 1 out of every 8 fax machines sold in America? Office Depot. Taking care of business.
Joined once again by family psychologist Lawrence Balter from our CNN Bureau in New York. Dr. Balter, turning to the matter of television, should our children be seeing scenes from Oklahoma City?
Well, a lot of it varies with the age of the child, but in general, although I believe honesty is the best policy with kids and they should be informed when things happen, I don't think they should really be seeing all the gory details. Certainly there's been tremendous media coverage. It's unavoidable. Kids are going to see something. One of the tips I'd give is not to leave the TV on all day, you know, kind of as background noise. Many families, they do that. Because too much stuff is really being shown for small children to digest, really.
We have a caller on the line now
difficult.
from Winnipeg. Go ahead. What's your question for Dr. Balter? Caller from Winnipeg?
Yes, I'm in from Montreal, Quebec, Canada. I want you to know right now that our hearts are with you. I'm an EMT worker here, and I wouldn't even dare live half of what they're living down there with the kids and stuff. I want to know if the kids coming out of the hospitals, are they having psychological help with foster families and stuff?
Well, as far as I know, I'm in New York, and I'm not there in Oklahoma City, but as far as I know, they are being offered psychological services, and I certainly would hope that people are working with the foster families and the families who've been affected by this.
Our next caller is from Kansas.
Hello, I'd like to thank CNN and Dr. Balter for allowing the parents to call you and ask some questions. My 15-year-old came home Wednesday from school, and she was alternately raging and crying at what had happened. This seemed to have touched a well of other emotions from other past experiences that she's had. So bringing other things to the surface. Is there some way that I can help her, especially to direct her rage over what happened?
Yes, I think you touched on something really important. This is something in and of itself. This tragedy is so awful that in and of itself it brings up in us all kinds of conflicting feelings. Frustration and helplessness and rage. And also it sometimes touches off feelings of frustration and rage we have about a lot of things. It becomes kind of a symbol for a lot of things that we're upset about. Yes, I think there are a number of things you can talk to a teenager about. First of all, because she's enraged, you ought to help her develop a vocabulary to express that anger. You see, if we can express anger, and if we're given words to put our anger into, it makes us feel a little less helpless, and that's important for mental health. So you can tell her, yes, this was a horrendous, horrible, terrible act, and the people who do things like this are cowards, it's sneaky, and they're doing something against innocent people. And by giving her an opportunity to express her deep outrage, and I think we all share that, I think it'll make her feel somewhat better. You know, you can't feel altogether better. It's not as though one conversation can make your feelings go away. This is a horrible incident, and it's not going to go away with one little talk. Also, then you might ask her to discuss with you other things that are on her mind, other dissatisfactions, other concerns, other sources of frustration, and things that are making her angry. So you might have an opportunity to kind of develop some communication and cement a better relationship with her.
Mr. Balter, many thanks for your guidance today, and we hope our program today offered you and your family some insights in a time of heartache and hope. I'm Pat Etheridge. I'll be back with Parenting Today next Saturday at 6:30 a.m. and 1:30 p.m. Eastern.
Hello, from the CNN Center in Atlanta, I'm Catherine Calloway. Coming up next, the very latest on the bombing in Oklahoma, and then we'll have your health. But right now, latest on the weather situation with Byron Miranda and how it's hampering rescue efforts in Oklahoma City. Byron?
Catherine, it's been a mess through Oklahoma as well as through the southeast. Take a look at the radar summary map. You can see that we do have heavy shower activity. These little orange lights indicate thunderstorm activity. In fact, there is now a thunderstorm watch. You see this little box here? That indicates that there is a severe thunderstorm watch for this section of the United States through Oklahoma City. Where there are severe thunderstorms, there are the potentials for tornadoes, and these are tornado watch boxes all the way into Georgia. The rain is going to continue through this evening in Oklahoma. Intermittently, you'll see some heavy showers, probably a little clearing, and some more heavy showers. But by tomorrow, if we can hold out by tomorrow through Oklahoma City, hopefully there'll be some clearing, slight chance of rain through that section of the United States. Through the southeast here, heavy rain all the way into Atlanta, Georgia, where they're having the Freaknik Festival. Now let's go back to you, Catherine.
We'll be back in a moment with the latest news from Oklahoma City. Please stay with us.
Blue represents the state of Oklahoma. The purple represents the children who lost their lives in a bombing. And the yellow represents the people for whom we still hold hope.
All of a sudden, Americans are learning about a fringe element of the society, extremists on the far right, white supremacists. How much of a threat do these groups represent to you as part of the federal government and to the public at large?
Well, the groups, they sort of represent a broad spectrum of ideologies and dangers. The groups that we are not concerned about are groups that just feel that they need to mobilize themselves because of some concern that their constitutional rights are being infringed on. I put them on the far left. On the far right, we have people who actually believe in murdering federal agents, believe in the bombing attacks such as that we experienced here on April 19th. Those are the groups that concern us the most. Obviously, in the U.S., where we're concerned about constitutional rights, freedom of expression, freedom of association, we have to be careful about the way in which we investigate these groups.
The ATF, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, was located in the building behind us that was destroyed on Wednesday. And now there is official word that perhaps this one suspect, Timothy McVeigh, was obsessed with the Waco incident 2 years ago to the day of the explosion. What can you tell us about the whole involvement of the Waco incident and this bombing?
Well, all I can tell you is that ATF was in the building, Customs Service was in the building, U.S. Secret Service, DEA, and about 550 federal employees. That was a federal center. These groups often are concerned about the federal government and what it might do to them as citizens. So I can only tell you that whatever this person was thinking, nothing on earth justified this murderous act.
But there is this link that the Justice Department itself is now making in the arraignment that this individual, Timothy McVeigh, was apparently obsessed with Waco. There must be a lot of people out there that you've been monitoring, that you know about, on these extreme fringe elements that are obsessed with Waco.
Well, these groups tend to be obsessed with the right to bear arms, the right to assemble and talk about bearing arms. And ATF is the federal law enforcement agency that's responsible for enforcing the gun law. So they tend to receive the focus of a lot of the dislike and distrust of this group, as well as the FBI and other federal law enforcement groups. So these groups hate federal law enforcement. They hate what federal law enforcement are empowered and required to do. The command centers we have set up are command centers where you have state, local, federal law enforcement officers all trying to investigate this heinous act. Who's investigating it? ATF. Who investigated the World Trade Center? ATF, along with the FBI and other state and local law enforcement officers. There is nothing to justify their fear, and there's nothing to justify the kind of acts that the people involved in this attack took.
How is this investigation going right now? We understand that John Doe #2 is still at large.
John Doe number 2 is still at large. We just got through visiting the FBI command center where ATF, FBI, and state and local law enforcement officials are gathering information, following leads. Same thing is true at the ATF Customs Command Center, the Secret Service IRS Command Center. You basically have all of U.S. law enforcement focused on trying to apprehend these murderers.
Do you know, without telling us, because you're not going to, I assume, do you know the identity, the name of John Doe number 2?
I'm not going to answer that question.
I understand that there's a lot of sensitivities right now, but these other 2 brothers, that originally one of them was suspected of being John Doe number 2, the investigators no longer assume that one of those are John Doe number 2?
Well, what happens is the media is so intense on investigating our investigation that any time any kind of lead is being followed, we are being followed. So there are a lot of false reports, there are a lot of inaccurate reports, there's a lot of misreporting that's going on, but right now we are not going to comment publicly on who John Doe number 2 is or who the other individuals are as well.
When Janet Reno, the Attorney General, and Louis Freeh, the FBI Director, say that there are probably other suspects involved in this conspiracy, how many others are we talking about?
That's, again, I think Janet Reno and Louis Freeh and John McGaugh, everyone has made it clear we can't talk about this. I know you personally, Wolf. You wouldn't want us to do anything to jeopardize this investigation. No one would want us to do anything to jeopardize this investigation. It's going to take time. We've already demonstrated our commitment. Secretary Rubin's demonstrated it, Attorney General Reno's demonstrated it, and the President's demonstrated it.
Just wrapping up briefly, how endangered are Americans, the American public right now as a result of this? Are there any additional precautions that Americans should be taking because of copycats or sympathizers or others, domestic homegrown terrorists?
I don't think there are any special precautions we ought to take as American people. I think we ought to do what we would do in any ordinary case, use our common sense. If you see something suspicious, report it to the nearest law enforcement officer. Don't hesitate to report anything other than that. And just take the natural common sense precautions you'd want other people to take.
Ron Noble, thank you so much. I know you've been very busy all day. You'll be here for the memorial service tomorrow. Yeah. We appreciate your time very much.
Thank you. I just want to say that on behalf of Secretary Rubin, our hearts go out to all the people who've lost their lives. We today determined that at least 5 Secret Service employees have lost their lives. We still have 3 who are missing, 2 from the Customs Service and 1 from the Secret Service. We hold out hope for them.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you. Now joining us in Washington, D.C. is Oklahoma's Senator Don Nickles. Senator, thank you very much for taking some time. I know you're coming out here tomorrow for this memorial service as well. Is that correct?
That's right, Wolf.
Senator, you have been obviously monitoring this investigation. How is it going from your perspective?
Well, I'm very pleased. I think there's been outstanding cooperation with the federal officials and with the state officials, and my compliments to everybody, and from the president on down. I've talked to Director Freeh, I've talked to the FBI agents, Mr. Kennedy and others that were in charge in Oklahoma City, and they've really led a massive, massive effort, and they're already having some success. I hope and pray that they'll have continued success and find every single person that had anything to do with this act of terrorism and bring them to justice. I think that will make people more comfortable. Even the fact that they've already had the one arrest and they have excellent leads to follow up, I think has maybe made people breathe a little easier. You know, when nobody had any idea who was responsible, it left everybody really sitting on pins and needles. So my compliments to law enforcement officials, federal and state, for the outstanding work they've done so far.
Senator, you have obviously monitored a lot of these fringe groups, these extremist groups, white supremacist groups. How much of a threat are they in Oklahoma?
I don't really, of course I can't say there's no threat when you have this kind of, you have certainly the worst disaster as far as deaths are concerned in our nation's history as an act of terrorism. I don't guess they were, I hope they didn't happen or perpetrated by Oklahomans, but regardless, you know, it proves that we're vulnerable anywhere, whether it's Oklahoma or any place else in the country, that anybody's susceptible to this type of, I want to say nutcase, or somebody that has this philosophy. They should be punished and hopefully punished very quickly and set an example that may deter somebody from doing something so evil in the future.
You know that House Speaker Newt Gingrich today was furious when he was asked by a reporter whether all of the statements that he and others, Republicans mostly, have been making about the federal government and getting the government off of our backs, that perhaps that could have contributed to these extremist elements. Your reaction to this entire controversy now?
Well, I think the Speaker's outrage is justified. That's a ridiculous statement. There's a lot of us that can want government to be less expensive, to be less regulatory, but that That in no way, anybody would try and stretch that to say that that would have any inkling of support for someone to blow up a building and kill many, many innocent federal employees and their families. That's a ridiculous statement, and frankly shouldn't have been made.
How will this incident, in your opinion, in the Senate affect those who want even tighter gun control legislation?
I don't know that it affects directly on gun control legislation. What it will affect, Wolf, is we're working on some anti-terrorism legislation, and I think it will propel that through the Senate very quickly. As a matter of fact, on Monday, we'll be introducing a resolution. I say we, I'm talking about myself and Senator Inhofe from Oklahoma, Senator Dole, I think Senator Daschle, Senator Hatch, and I expect Senator Biden will be introducing some legislation. One, since a Senate resolution condemning this act of terrorism and showing our sympathies for the families that are so severely impacted, and also in the resolution saying that we should move forward very quickly and implement some legislation that's pending. The administration's introduced some provisions dealing with terrorism. Senator Dole in the Republican crime bill has other provisions that many of us support, and my guess is you'll see a very prompt enactment of that both in the Senate and in the House to toughen our laws against acts of terrorism, whether it be domestic or international terrorism.
Okay, Senator Nichols, thank you very much, and we'll be seeing you out here tomorrow in Oklahoma City. We appreciate your time as well. Coming up next, we'll have Bill Schneider with the story behind the story on this Oklahoma City bombing. Please stay with us.
Space shuttle systems.
Tactical fighters.
Radar. Missile defense.
Smart highways.
Satellites. Airlifters.
Video game software.
Space launch vehicles.
Night vision.
Stealth.
Here in Ohio, we tested the new Honda Accord V6 and discovered that the car more people buy than any other is now better and quicker than ever before. Now, why would you want a car that lets you get away so fast?
You're late.
You got your reasons. The new Accord V6 from Honda.
Now, for the first time since his #1 bestseller, A Time to Kill, America's most popular author returns to the courtroom. The Rainmaker, John Grisham's new #1 bestseller. The suspense never rests.
I use a woman's deodorant, a woman's hand cream, even a woman's razor. But when it comes to medicine, I won't use something just because it's made for women. I want to use what my doctor recommends. For hemorrhoids, that's Preparation H. It's effective against even my worst symptoms, like swelling. Yet it's so gentle and soothing, more women trust it. Sure, you should still use a woman's shampoo, but for something you take as seriously as hemorrhoids, use a serious medicine, Preparation H. Recommended by doctors, trusted by women.
The Peanut Guy, the Full Count, the Steel Sign, and the Fastball Up and In. It's all coming back to you, and TBS is the best seat in the house for the Braves and the Yankees. Live at 1:05 Eastern, Sunday on TBS.
Welcome back to this special edition of Inside Politics Weekend. We're live in Oklahoma City after the explosion, the bombing here earlier this week. Joining us in Washington is CNN's political analyst, Bill Schneider, to talk about some of the political repercussions involving the president and the Republican Congress. Bill?
Well, you know, Wolf, early this week, President Clinton had to explain why he was still relevant to the nation's agenda. By the end of the week, the president's relevance was firmly established.
Justice for these killers will be certain, swift, and severe.
In a time of crisis, Americans instinctively rally around their president. Only he can give voice to the anger and determination all Americans feel. Since the Oklahoma City tragedy, President Clinton has been the center of attention, not Speaker Gingrich, not any of the multitude of Republicans competing for the president's job. A crisis is an opportunity for a president to establish his authority. he has to reassure the country that he's in control of the situation, even if he really isn't. Great crises produce great presidents, like Abraham Lincoln and Franklin Roosevelt.
The only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
The Iranian hostage crisis initially bolstered President Carter in 1980. He seemed resolute and determined. It helped him fend off a challenge from within his own party. As the stalemate wore on, however, President Carter seemed hapless and ineffectual, and Americans opted for a stronger brand of leadership. The Oklahoma City bombing is even more frightening to Americans. In a situation like this, all Americans feel like hostages. During the Cold War, every American president was tested under fire. Bill Clinton was deprived of such a test, and he suffered for it. President Clinton may be finally facing his test, and not in Berlin or Beirut, but in Oklahoma City.
President Clinton has been very effective in communicating a sense of reassurance and security, I think, to Americans this week, particularly in the area where Americans are most fearful, and that is with respect to their children. That's where the president has focused his attention. That's where Americans' fears are concentrated. That's what they wanted him to do, and he's done it. Wolf?
Okay, Bill, stand by. We're going to expand this discussion in a moment with Jack Nelson of the Los Angeles Times and historian and author Michael Beschloss. Please stay with us. And author Michael Beschloss and our own Bill Schneider, CNN's political analyst. Thank you all of you for joining us. First, Jack Nelson of the LA Times. Looking at this truck bombing earlier this week and how it's being played out in Washington, is this going to help the president in terms of his own re-election, in terms of his own political strength, or is it going to hurt him?
Well, of course, I think it depends maybe on how it plays out, but certainly right now, as Bill Snyder said earlier, it has given him the opportunity to show that he's relevant. I think beyond that, though, Wolf, the fact is that this is a continuing story. It's going to go on for a long time, and it's going to involve a lot of these real extreme right-wing groups. I can't help but think that in some sense that's going to help the president, because one of the things it does, of course, it raises the whole issue again of gun control. All of these organizations are violent opponents of any sort of gun control. I think the suspect arrested in this case was carrying a semi-automatic weapon. Senator Dole, of course, has written a letter to the National Rifle Association saying that he's going to lead the effort to roll back the ban on semi-automatic weapons that was in the crime bill. Senator Graham has said the same thing, and most of the Republican candidates, I think, are very much against gun control, other than maybe Governor Pete Wilson of California. So I think it's a continuing story, and it doesn't seem to me that there's any way that it plays to the Republicans' advantage. I may be wrong about that, but it doesn't seem to me to be that way.
Michael Beschloss, your thoughts?
I guess I'd even broaden it beyond what Jack Nelson has said, and that is to suggest that throughout history, when there have been incidents like this, it brings up one of the central cleavages that really runs back to the 18th century, and that is the conflict in this country between civil liberties, ensuring civil liberties for the individual on one hand, and at the same time, government making sure that individual citizens have some measure of security. Gun control brings that out, but I think we'll see it in a lot of other arenas as well.
Bill Schneider, Newt Gingrich, as I reported earlier, was furious today when he was asked whether his and other Republican statements condemning the government, condemning the bureaucrats in Washington, may have contributed to this environment, to this momentum out there. Is this a fair question to ask someone like the House Speaker?
I think Speaker Gingrich was exactly right in his angry response. It is outrageous to suggest that conservatives are in any way responsible for the tragedy in Oklahoma City. But the bombing does focus public concern on a series of issues like gun control and violence and right-wing extremism. These were angry white men who went over the edge. Those are issues that conservatives are going to be a lot less comfortable dealing with if they move to the front of the agenda.
Okay, all of you, please stay with us for a moment. We're going to take another break. When we come back, we're going to continue this discussion.
When you do your own investing, deciding which mutual funds to buy can be difficult. And with thousands of funds to choose from, you could end up feeling a bit overwhelmed. But Charles Schwab makes selecting mutual funds easy with our new free Fund Map for Windows. FundMap helps you choose from well-known funds for your no annual fee IRA or any Schwab account. So, to make selecting mutual funds easy,
maybe it's time to come to Schwab.
Our special guest will be the White House Chief of Staff, Leon Panetta, to update us on the current investigation. In Oklahoma City, I'm Wolf Blitzer.
Weeknights, Michael and John shake things.
Grows grimmer with each passing day, searching for signs of life in the ruins of a federal building.
And the hunt continues for this man, a tattooed suspect known as John Doe number 2. Welcome to Prime News. I'm Joe Oliver at the CNN Center in Atlanta.
And I'm Jean Meserve in Washington. Federal investigators in the nation's deadliest act of terrorism are concentrating their manhunt on a suspect known as John Doe number 2, described as a white male, medium build, square-jawed, about 5'9", 175 to 180 pounds, with brown hair and a tattoo on his left arm. He is considered armed and dangerous. His alleged accomplice in the Oklahoma bombing, Timothy McVeigh, was taken into custody Friday night and charged with malicious damaging and destroying by means of an explosive a federal building. Other charges are expected to follow. A man who authorities say is an Army acquaintance of McVeigh, 40-year-old Terry Lynn Nichols, is being held in Wichita, Kansas as a material witness in the case. Terry Nichols' brother James is also being held as a material witness. James is being held in Detroit, where he faces a court date on Tuesday. Suspect Timothy McVeigh reportedly listed James Nichols as his next of kin when McVeigh was booked in Oklahoma this week on unrelated charges.
In Oklahoma City, wet and chilly rescuers continue their grim search through the rubble. We go to CNN's Bernard Shaw in Oklahoma City for more. Bernie?
Thank you, Joe. The fire rescue people, once again, are walking, crawling on their hands and knees, sometimes on their stomachs, to continue this very depressing operation where they come across bodies. They are using paint signals on walls and what have you. We're going to get a very late update from the Assistant Fire Chief, John Hanson, in just a moment. But this is day 4 of the tragedy here, and CNN's Greg Lamont brings us up to date.
From a psychological standpoint, it may have been the worst day to date. It was a day not fit for man or beast. Yet the beast remains, standing as an agonizing reminder that, in many respects, the search has really just begun.
We're just now starting to scratch the surface. We're finding toys and little cots that are twisted and things like that.
Searchers are just now getting close to the area they dread the most, the daycare center. Heavy rain slowed the search for more victims, and consequently, so too the families searching for miracles, praying that pockets in the rubble will provide a shelter for life.
You know, there's pockets, and that is a phenomenon that occurs, and it's not unusual. It's not happening with any regularity yet. I don't predict it will.
Even so, it didn't stop the families of victims from braving the driving rains. They continue to show up at a local church, hoping for an answer, hoping someone can tell them something.
When do you think we will know? Do you think there's a chance someone may still be alive? You know, why is it taking so long to identify our loved ones? Why has it been 3 days and we still don't know?
Arch Carrillo has come to the realization that he has lost his younger brother. He shows photographs, hoping a dentist will recognize Michael Carrillo and send dental records.
You hope for the best and you anticipate the worst, but regardless of what happens, you have to be realistic about these things, and we hope for a miracle, but we know that we will be with him again in the next life.
In Perry, Oklahoma.
There is also the bitter realization that someone from the U.S. may have been involved in the bombing.
I have a daughter that's 3, and to think that she'll grow up in this is scary.
Unless we get a grip on ourselves, unless this country turns back to a moral foundation, unless we have basic beliefs and basic characters and moral values, this, I'm afraid, is the beginning of the end of the country.
It's hard to believe Americans blowing up Americans like that.
The reference is to this man, Timothy McVeigh, who has been charged in the bombing and is in federal custody. His public defender wants his trial moved out of the state.
When do you think we will know? Do you think there's a chance someone may still be alive? You know, why is it taking so long to identify our loved ones? Why has it been 3 days and we still don't know?
His public defender wants his trial moved out of the state.
it is so ingrained into the psyches of everyone in Oklahoma that it would be impossible for him to receive any kind of fair consideration in Oklahoma.
More arrests may be imminent, but on this day, it seems, the weather has taken center stage and is a reflection of this city's tears. Greg Lamont, CNN, Oklahoma City.
Assistant Fire Chief John Hanson joins us now, having just come over from the building. And I see that the cranes are moving again, John.
Yes, sir, that's good news. With the threat of lightning today, we hadn't been able to use those cranes. We need those cranes to lift heavy debris off an area where the pancake collapse is, where we believe the Social Security office, the Child Care Center, maybe part of the credit union, and victims from the floors 5, 6, 7 may be down in that area.
What about all this rain that has fallen today? Have you been able to pump out 25%, 50%?
We pretty well got a handle on the rain that was in the basement. It hadn't caused us that big of a difficulty. That lightning threat has been both more of a challenge today. Some structural challenges. We had to stop for about an hour today while our structural engineers shored up another part of the building, and some of the firefighters down there are referring to those gentlemen as our guardian angels. They look over our shoulders at the building while we're at work.
Is there any hope?
Well, we're working against the clock. As the clock ticks, the hope diminishes. Right now, it would almost take a miracle, but we're apprehensive, and we're going to remain upbeat and confident that maybe when we open an area, we'll have a little hand reach out, and we'll have that miracle.
How many people have you come across in the digging and the pulling apart of all of this debris? How many people have you come across today?
Well, I left the building a moment ago, went into part of the basement, part of the first floor area. I counted about 12 fatalities in that area. That's not included in our 70 number. Those are numbers that we've cleared out of the building. We still have, we know of at least 4 people buried in the rubble in the building across the street. And again, we have not got into the cavity where we've been told to expect a lot of victims. Hopefully we won't have them down there, but we're fearful that tally tomorrow may go way up.
John Hanson, Assistant Fire Chief, thanks very much. A very emotional symbol here amid this wreckage. 2 flags atop a black crane. The flag of the United States of America and the fluttering blue flag of the state of Oklahoma. I'm Bernard Shaw reporting live from Oklahoma City. Now back to Joe and Gene.
Thank you, Bernie. We have much more on the Oklahoma City bombing coming up. President and Mrs. Clinton take time out to address children's fears about the bombing.
And a security expert trying to make the World Trade Center safer gives his perspective on the Oklahoma City investigation.
Taking care of business.
Jill Doherty reports President and Mrs. Clinton used today's weekly radio address to ease the fears of the nation's children.
At least 12 children have died in the Oklahoma bombing, and there's been some concern that other children who've heard and seen reports about that could be traumatized. So with the First Lady by his side, President Clinton turned his weekly radio address into an Oval Office discussion with more than 24 children. Their parents, government workers representing 13 agencies that had offices in the Oklahoma City Federal Building.
We want children to know that it's okay to be frightened by something as bad as this. Your parents understand it, your teachers understand it, and we're all there for you.
The children called the bombing a mean act.
I thought the people that did it should be punished very badly to hurt the children.
There are many more good people in the world than bad and evil people. Just think of what we have seen in the last few days. Think of all the police officers and the firefighters, the doctors and the nurses, all of the neighbors and the rescue workers, all of the people who have come to help all of those who were hurt in Oklahoma.
The president urged parents to encourage their children to talk about what they're feeling. If they're watching the news about the bombing, watch with them. Listen to their questions and answer honestly.
Tell them that I have promised every child, every parent, every person in America, that when we catch the people who did this, we will make sure that they can never hurt another child again, ever.
The president's radio messages usually get a partisan response. This time, it didn't happen.
I know I speak for all Oklahomans when I say thank you, Mr. President.
You stood with us in our time of pain, and we pledge to stand with you as America pursues justice for this awful crime.
Sunday, President and Mrs. Clinton will attend a memorial service for the victims of the bombing in Oklahoma City, where they're expected to meet with rescue workers to hear their personal stories. Jill Doherty, CNN, the White House.
As Jill mentioned, President and Mrs. Clinton fly to Oklahoma City Sunday for a memorial service. CNN will carry the memorial service live starting at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific.
After visiting the scene of the disaster, House Speaker Newt Gingrich is praising rescuers, investigators, and President Clinton. Gingrich toured the scene before dawn Saturday morning. He offered his personal thanks to searchers for the hard and dangerous work they're doing, and he came down hard on the bombers.
Suspect or suspects may have considered themselves to be political revolutionaries.
They're murderers.
They
are murderers.
Any message to
Yes.
self-styled revolutionaries?
If you commit murder, we're going to treat you as a murderer and go for the death penalty because you are a murderer. No political nonsense. If you kill other Americans, you are a murderer, and we should treat you straight up as a murderer, and there shouldn't be any talk about any justification. There is no excuse for any American to take the life of any other American, period.
Mr. Gingrich praised the President and Attorney General Janet Reno, saying they've taken, quote, exactly the right tone in response to the bombing.
The Jordanian American who has been cleared as a suspect in the bombing says he and his wife are being harassed by residents in Oklahoma City, where the couple lives. Abraham Ahmad says people are dumping trash on his lawn, and he says someone spit on his wife. Ahmad told our affiliate KFOR that the humiliation began when officials picked him up in London Thursday.
I'm not angry because I do understand why they stopped me. I'm angry especially about what they did in London. It was so insulting, so humiliating. You know, you starve, you're so tired, and you ask just for basic things so you can stand, you know, and so you can talk. And they refuse to do that. And they put a handcuff, or, you know, my hands, and here's like 20, 30 policemen around me, and I say, just please respect that. I got nothing to do with it. I am innocent. I know you have a job to do. Just cover my hands. You know, I don't want the people, I'm walking, and here is another, you know, 20, 30 policemen around me, and just look at the people looking at me like, here's the guy, you know, I'm sure it's already in the news, and here's the guy who killed I don't know how many people already. Just, I say, what happened to innocent until proven guilty? I just, please take my jacket and cover my hands. I don't want the people to look at me that way.
Ahmad, who volunteered to return to the U.S. for questioning, says the FBI agents treated him with respect.
Still to come, we'll talk to a security expert who investigated the terrorist bombing of the World Trade Center. And in our look at some of the day's other news, we'll attend an anniversary celebration. Mother Nature is the guest of honor.
We've painted the morning sun in Santa Barbara that burns away those blue-gray mists that cool the coastal vines and brighten all the colors in the grapes that go to make a
kind of a mess, and we have some heavy to severe weather.
Many are drawing comparisons between the Oklahoma City bombing and the 1993 bombing at the World Trade Center. Joining us now from New York is Michael Cherkasky. He's the former chief investigator for the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, and he worked on the World Trade Center bombing investigation. Mr. Cherkasky is now a security consultant with Kroll Associates. One of his projects is revising the security plan for the Trade Center. Mr. Cherkasky, we've seen a lot of things happen since the bomb went off Wednesday morning. Can you compare the pace of this investigation to the investigation of the World Trade Center bombing?
I think this one is moving along very quickly. There's been an excellent team involved in this. We've learned some lessons from the World Trade Center bombing, and they've been applied by the law enforcement officials who've been molded into this team. So we're moving along wonderfully.
Is it just pure luck that one of the suspects, Timothy McVeigh, has already been arrested?
Well, it is a combination of learning some lessons, a good team, and certainly there's some luck there. In the World Trade Center, it took us 3 or 4 days to get the vehicle identification number. Here, we were lucky enough to get that almost immediately because the axle was blown a couple of blocks away. So we've had some luck, but also it's learn the lessons of what had happened previously and apply those lessons.
Will investigators need the same sort of luck in apprehending the suspect known as John Doe number 2?
Well, it's not luck. I mean, fundamentally, you get some breaks. I don't consider it luck. They have again a net of people who are working hard to follow the different enormous number of leads that they're getting now. They are not considering that they've had a victory yet. What they're doing right now is they're looking to say, how widespread was this conspiracy? How far did it go? We've got one other key suspect out there. We've got to apprehend him. But we have to know the full extent of this conspiracy. And anyone who, in fact, was involved knowingly and helped out knowingly, they're going to want to apprehend.
How much of an impact will the $2 million reward being offered have on bringing forth more information leading to another arrest?
Well, the reward money had a significant impact on the World Trade Center as to the last individual who was apprehended. I would suspect that here it's in America. There are a lot of very patriotic people who are deeply care about what happened here, who have been affected. They're stepping forward. You will have one or two people who will, because of fear or otherwise, who would not otherwise come forward, who because of the money will take that step. Certainly maybe someone who maybe would peripherally help these individuals may come forward who would otherwise would not because of the money.
Now, you mentioned that the investigators have not declared a victory just because they've made one arrest. Where do you think they are at this point in the investigation compared to the World Trade Center bombing?
They're much further along. They really have a very firm view of who did this, why it was done. What they don't know probably right now is the full extent of the conspiracy, whether it was one or two or three people who were involved or whether there were more. So they're much further ahead. Remember, the World Trade Center bombing case is still, there's an ongoing trial right now that has some peripheral impact upon the World Trade Center bombing. That's almost 2 years later. So that this is really moving forward much, much more rapidly.
And any guesstimation on how long this investigation will take?
Well, it will not be wrapped up it will be weeks, if not months, when they will still be sifting through the evidence. Remember, fundamentally, they've got to convict these individuals, not just arrest them, not just charge them, but convict them. So they will be working at this for months, if not for a year.
Security consultant and former World Trade Center bombing investigator Michael Cherkasky, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And that's it for Prime News. I'm Jean Meserve in Washington.
And I'm Joe Oliver at CNN Center in Atlanta. Stay with us. Sports Saturday is next.
All the people and the families that you take your kids somewhere one day and the next day your kid's not there when you go to pick them up.
And Amy, what would you say to a young boy like this, a 5 or 6 year old who feels like this could happen to me in my neighborhood, in my school?
Well, I think it's kind of like a 1 in a million thing, and I don't think there is a lot of people out there who would do this. And right now I think they do have the people who did it. They are caught. And or one of them definitely is caught.
Mm-hmm.
So that offers some reassurance.
Aside from sharing concerns, one Chicago boy said he wanted to collect pennies at school to donate to a special fund. Be it in Chicago or Oklahoma City itself, most people heard of the tragedy first through the immediacy of radio and television. And the broadcast stations in Oklahoma City are doing more than just reporting the facts surrounding the bombing. WGN's Sonia Gant is in Oklahoma City live with that part of our coverage tonight. Sonia?
Dina, we have Governor Frank Keating with us this afternoon, or this night, excuse me. And Governor, you were telling me that you would actually characterize right now the rescue efforts today as pretty marginal. Why do you say that?
Well, unfortunately, the weather has been miserable. We've really had a number of accommodations that really hurt us. The first is the back of the building looked imperiled. They had to go in and shore it up early this morning. I was here about 20 of 6, and they were in there trying to fix it, and they did. That's fine. Then the rains and the lightning and the wind came, and the lightning was bad because you couldn't use the cranes, and the rain and the wind was bad because all of the damage to the building is in the front, all of the collapsed portion, of course, in the front. so the wind and the rain jeopardized everything in those floors that could fall on the rescue workers, so everybody had to be pulled out. But later this afternoon, the cranes started working again, the rescue workers were back, but they were always in the basement in the back. So give us a 40% shot, 60% no shot. I would say tomorrow the weather's supposed to be better, and we'll try and make it up.
Governor, tell us a little bit about your visit today with the families. You took the highway patrolman who arrested the suspect, Timothy McVeigh, to visit with the families.
Yeah, the trooper is named Charles Hanger, and a real courageous trooper, obviously a real professional. And I took him with me and, of course, made the statement to the families, which was a very, very tough visit, that we were doing everything we could do. We had the best professionals, the best equipment. Nobody was sitting on their hands. Everybody was working around the clock to find their loved ones, and we hoped that we could find survivors. Then I introduced the trooper as the hero, and he said, you know, my prayers are with you. I just did my job, but I wish I could do more to help you find your loved ones. And they gave him an ovation, stood up, came around him and hugged him. It was really a very sad, a very poignant moment of real gratitude on the part of those 150-odd people whose loved ones are still in that building.
Governor Frank Keating, thank you for joining us, and let's hope that tomorrow brings a better day in terms of weather.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.